All right, so we here at Amber Book, we work in a place that's pretty remote, but or at least those who are not remote. So Tyler works from Raleigh, which is obviously not remote, but Amber Book World headquarters is in tiny town, little hamlet of Blacksburg, Virginia. And what we lack in great restaurants or direct flights, we certainly make up for in scenic beauty. So as a group, we go every once in a while. In fact, we just went today on a hike or a run. In this case, this is about 2 weeks ago, we were going for a run, and you can see what's happening here, right? Or maybe you can't. What the hell is happening here? What are all these sticks coming out of the ground, and they're kind of like metal sticks, and there's this like drool coming, this kind of gray drool coming down. And here it is from the other side. And again, you see the metal sticks and the gray drool, and then there's some equipment maybe putting some more sticks in the ground. And again, you see them here, and you see them here. And so the question is, what's going on? And so what's going on is this is a big project to limit the amount of erosion that's happening on this hillside that's adjacent to the road. So I did what I always do, which is just like go park the car and just get out and just start, videotaping or photographing workmen at construction sites, which they don't always love, but they almost always love, actually. I found that a truism that people love to talk about their work, and everyone actually. No, that's not true. Most people love to talk about their work, and I find it eternally fascinating that there's someone who does this or anything for a living. I can't believe people do stuff for a living. It's amazing. And so you see right there, he's got this right here. He's got this kind of 4-inch drill bit on an 1.5 inch hollow pipe. And so he's sticking it in this machinery. And what it's going to do, it's going to kind of pound it into the ground as it spins it. So it's going to drill it into the ground. So it's a hollow pipe. And so if this is the bank of the hill, it's a hollow pipe, and they're going to drill it down. It's hollow. And then it's got an oversized bit on the front of it. And so they're going to open up a hole that's meaningfully bigger than the 1.5 inch pipe. So the pipe is about the size of a railing, the diameter of a railing. And so you see right here, it's driving it into the ground. You can see right here, it's kind of pushing it into the ground. I had to butter them up for a little bit first before I got permission to cross the street and go kind of behind their cones. You'll see that in a minute. You won't see me buttering them up, but you'll see me, but you'll see this from the other angle. But yeah, we want to stabilize the hillside. We want to stabilize the hillside. And so we're going to essentially stick nails into the hillside. And what's coming down here, this kind of thing spilling over, is grout. More on that in a bit too. So what you're going to see is this in a second, this is going to kind of pull back up. This little device is going to reverse it. And when it reverses it, it's going to pull some of the soil in here out. But it won't, importantly, be pulling the soil that's inside the hollow pipe, just the soil that's in the hole around the hollow pipe. We'll talk about that in a minute also. And then it's going to go back down again. So it's pulling the soil out, just like when you sometimes drill, you'll pull the drill bit out and the sawdust will come out. Now, that was just one maybe 6 or 8 foot long pipe. But you're going to see in a second, he's going to add a second pipe. And I'm not going to show you the whole video, but he adds a third and a fourth and a fifth and so forth. So it's going in and out, in and out. And someone asked, is this similar to a tieback? And the answer is hell yeah, it's exactly similar to a tieback. A tieback is we're gonna see a tieback example in a little bit, but in the case of a tieback, we're gonna attach it to some kind of a, piece of wood or metal that's gonna hold the earth back often as part of a construction for a retaining wall, but also construction for a temporary way to hold back the earth when you're digging a foundation. Let's take a look at one of the others. All right, what's happening here? This is so cool. What the hell is happening here? Well, to the left of, do you see all that dust come out? You'll see it again in a little bit. There it goes. To the left of the equipment, to the left of the backhoe, there's a air compressor, and that air compressor is pushing air into the hollow pipe, and that's how we clear the soil out of the hollow pipe. Well, how do you push it into one and it happens to pop out the other? That's exactly what happens. So you put the compressed air into the first pipe, and that air then blows the soil that was in these hollow pipes. You're going to see it happen again, and it's going to blow the air. Here we're pulling out some of the soil, but it's going to blow. You see it, the dust over here? It's going to blow the air into the hollow pipe and kick out the soil that's in the hollow pipe, and then and there are seams or like little pockets of vacant areas underneath the rock, underneath the soil. Here he goes putting on the next one in the series. So they're going to push these down 30 to 40 feet down, and that way they can get a good get a kind of enough friction against the soil. But anyhow, they're going to push it. They're going to push it in, and they're going to blow the air through the. They're going to blow the air through the hollow pipe, and then the soil from pipe A is going to pop out one of the other pipes. You never know which one. It's often one next to it, which is the case here. But sometimes I asked him. I said, "Does sometimes the air, does sometimes soil blow out of like up on the hillside?" He said, "Sometimes." So sometimes they'll blow air down here, and then way up here on the right, upper right, or somewhere else, some random place, the soil will pop out. So here it goes in again. And then what they're going to do is, so you have this hillside, you have this 30 to 40 feet down kind of pipe. You have this hollow area around it because the tip of the pipe has a 4-inch bit, but the rest of the pipe only is about 1.5 inches. And then what we're going to do is they're going to bring a grout plant out, literally just a grout plant. And the difference between grout, well, let me ask you, what's the difference between grout and concrete? They're both cementitious. What's the difference? Go ahead and put it on the chat. Yeah, there's no aggregate in the grout. And so the consistency of the concrete is something close to peanut butter. Concrete's actually a lot more of a solid than you think it would be. And grout is much more on the consistency of milkshake. So they're going to pump later on, they're going to pump grout that's going to fill in this area all the way around on both sides of the hollow pipe, and then some of it, of course, will spill down the hillside, and so forth. So in the end, what they're going to do is they're going to take a net, and they're going to use those basically earth nails, these tiebacks. They're going to use them with the grout. They're going to use them to hold down the net, and then they're going to hydroseed, which is the same as hydromulching. There's two different words that mean the same thing. And you've seen this sometimes. It's always this kind of weird blue. They spray it on the hillside. It's a combination of seeding with water for the seeds to start growing, and a bunch of chemicals to kind of fertilize the whatever plants or whatever vegetation they're putting on the hillside. It's typically a hillside, not always. And you can't put it on when it's going to rain in the next 24 hours. But other than that, it's not a whole lot of rules to it. You just kind of spray it on the right amount, and here it is being sprayed on. And so our question, and so eventually they're going to get vegetation. So on that hillside, on that bank, they're going to get some kind of vegetation. And I cannot stress enough that is the goal. Always, best practice is always to get vegetation when you're dealing with erosion. We haven't out industrialized Mother Nature in this one area. So our question here is, riparian zones should be blank. Built on to maximize views and southern exposure? Oh, no. Drained to limit flooding? No. Planted with trees to limit erosion? Yes. And that's what this particular 40 minutes of competence session is about. Now, what's a riparian zone? Well, in section, if this is our stream bed, and here's our water level in the stream bed, it may be that low when it hasn't rained for a week or two, but when it just had a heavy rain, it may get, up to here. So the riparian zone is this area in plan that's kind of wet when there's a heavy rain, but maybe not wet when there hasn't been a heavy rain in a while. So it's not really the flood zone because it's not really like part of the flooding process, although certainly obviously there's a lot of overlap. But it's the area that sometimes gets wet and sometimes doesn't, and it is really ripe for erosion. And erosion is kind of a big deal. And so why is erosion a big deal? Well, because we paved everything. We paved everything. And then all the water that hits, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start from where the rain hits the ground and kind of work out downward from there. So we paved everything and we made it so the water can't seep into the ground. And when water seeps slowly into the ground in a kind of a distributed way, that's both better for stormwater runoff in terms of quantity, like how much water is rushing to the stream and likely to cause erosion later on, and removal of topsoil and flooding and all kinds of bad things, but also quality of stormwater, because the soil does a pretty good job, it turns out, of filtering the pollutants and things we don't want out of the water as it kind of goes and replenishes the aquifer underground. And so, and the old thinking was pave everything and then put a bunch of gutters to a bunch of drains, and then take that water and get it the hell away from the building. And yeah, I mean, that makes sense. From the building's point of view, that makes sense. But the problem is, if everyone does that, we have a tragedy of the commons, because the water then rushes into the streams, and then and the water itself takes away topsoil, and topsoil is really precious. And then it causes erosion in the streams, and then it causes flooding as well, and all the bad things that come with flooding. So the life safety concerns and the property damage and the washing away of the topsoil itself, because topsoil takes something like, I think it's like 1,000 years per inch to replenish. Topsoil is super, super valuable. And so one solution, one kind of approach is to pave less, and so maybe if you have a shopping center, you convince your client that they don't have to pave, to the maximum likely number of cars that are going to come on Black Friday. They can just pave to the cars that are going to be there almost all the time, and then have an overflow lot that's gravel or something that allows the water to go through. And yes, every once in a while you'll have a problem if it happens to snow on Black Friday, and then it's hard to clear snow from a gravel lot. But in general, it won't be a big problem. Now, the thing that probably gets the most press, because it's pretty sexy, is a green roof. But actually, green roofs aren't that exciting from a erosion point of view, because you could take that water from, generally we want to get water off the roof just from the point of view of the building. And there's no reason you have to take the water from the roof and put it directly into the stream. There are lots of ways to hold it before releasing it into the stream slowly or into the ground slowly. That can happen adjacent to the building or somewhere else on the site. It doesn't have to happen on the green roof. Now, these also get a lot of press, these porous pavers, and you always see photos like this, but I mean, I live in a pretty verdant part of the country, and more often than not, you see something like this, especially if it gets driven on a lot. So these things work if they're not driven on a lot, but if they're maintained. But if either one of those is not true, they usually wind up pretty muddy. Now, another way to do it is, and we do this often with parking lots, but we do it with buildings too, is we'll submerge a tank. And so we'll have somewhere in the lowest part of the parking lot, we'll have a drain, and then the water will just go into the tank. So if you're asked like where to put a drain, in a parking lot, you want to put it, or anywhere, you want to put it on the lowest part because that's where the water wants to go anyway. And so these things sit underground. Sometimes they'll take a bunch of big pipes and they'll just kind of put them together, and that'll be the tank. Then they'll cover this up, so they'll have all the water eventually kind of going to this, and it'll fill in. There's somewhere in here, there's connection, or here it is in the back end. There are connections, and we don't keep this water forever. We just kind of let it out very slowly into the stream, so as to not cause flooding or erosion. And in many ways, this kind of stormwater management is in some places, many places, is the tail that wags the dog right now, because we ignored it for so long collectively that, maybe 20, 30 years ago, we started saying, whoa, we can't just do this. And municipalities went way the other direction and started really making this a feature or a prerequisite to almost any kind of development, is some kind of a stormwater management plan. So then if we have bare earth, we're going to want to kind of hold it back, just like we saw. We're going to want to hold it back while we're waiting for the plants to grow, because we always want plants to grow if they can. That is by far the best practice. It is just no topping it. So you have these geotextiles. So this is kind of an open mesh, you see. There's a netting in here, and you can see the plants are coming in. You can see also there's a gabion wall forming here as a retaining wall. Here's another kind of mesh, I think similar to the one they were going to put on the embankment that I showed you at the beginning. Here's another mesh. Here's another geotextile that comes kind of flat, and you open it up, and then you can fill it with soil, and then you fill the soil with seeds, and then eventually you get hopefully an active vegetated berm. Here it is again, and this is a different, more dense geotextile. There's just an amazing number of. I went to Lowe's day before yesterday and bought some geotextiles for some planting I'm doing, and I didn't know which one to get. I teach this stuff. There are so many different choices, so I wasn't even sure which one to get. But there's tons of choices. Here are some more, and basically some are kind of open netting, as you saw, and some are biodegradable, as you saw, and some are more kind of quasi-permanent. Some keep weeds out. Most of them almost all of them, I think, let water through. Some let plants grow through, and so forth. And so our first goal is to limit erosion, and erosion is just what you think is the wearing away of the soil from wind and from rain. But our second goal after that is to do what's called sediment control. So we have erosion control, and we have sediment control, and they're related, but sediment control is all about, okay, there was erosion. Now we want to make sure we keep that topsoil on the site, because we don't want to put it in the stream, because A, we need it on the site for future plantings. And B, when we send all that topsoil to the stream, it really messes up the ecosystem of the stream, which is never made to be that cloudy. So we'll have silt fencing. That's what this stuff is called. It's called silt fencing. Oh, here's some more geotextiles, some more geotextiles. Oh, here's some more hydroseeding. Here's some plantings that are happening on an embankment to prevent erosion. And here, I showed you some of grass and some small things, but really our goal is trees. If we can do it, trees are because of their root system, trees are really the ways that we're going to keep in the soil the best. And so here they're planting, I think, what are going to be trees. And then you can see here just kind of how effective trees are at holding the soil in. But again, if it gets out, we have silt fencing, we have more silt fencing and more silt fencing. We have more of these things. You've seen them everywhere, especially lately on construction sites. Those are called wattles, W-A-T-T-L-E-S. They're sometimes made from straw, and they're sometimes called erosion control logs or erosion control rolls. Those names are probably easier to remember. As far as I know, wattles are not really important for you to know for the exam, but thought you might want to know what they were. And they do exactly what you think. They let the water through, but they keep the soil out of the drains, or out of kind of moving downstream, and keep them from taking away the topsoil, stripping the site of topsoil, and the twin evils of stripping the site of topsoil and cloudying up the water when it's not made to be that cloudy. Sometimes they're coconut husks, and sometimes we have lots of them. Sometimes we have a few. These are coconut, or these are wattles as kind of check dams. So they're, as the water moves down in a heavy rain, they're slowing it down. So not only are they trapping the sediment, but they're slowing down the water, so there'll be less erosion. And here you have check dams, but these dams are, and this is important for the exam, this phrase, check dam. And it's just a way to slow down the the water as it moves down the hill. Someone asked if these were similar to tiebacks. Yeah, I mean, so usually tiebacks are in the discussion of kind of retaining walls, either temporary for construction or permanent. And it's the same principle. We've basically stuck a nail in the ground. We've drilled a hole that was too big for it. We blew out all the dirt, and then we fill the thing with grout so we'd have enough contact with the soil and the earth, so that with friction, we're kind of just going to make sure that this whole wall doesn't topple over. And you know, there's a whole nother discussion, and maybe we'll do a future 40 minutes of competence on just how to keep back the earth during construction. That's really fascinating. Also, just, you know, how do we keep the earth back so that we can dig a foundation, a basement? But that's probably a different conversation than we're having today. Today, we're talking about erosion. So this is what we don't want to see. This is bad, bad, bad. And if you see this, you should be thinking that, like, oh my God, gold is leaving. I mean, I used to work for a design build landscape architect when I was in high school. And he taught me, I just took this picture less than an hour ago. I'm that guy who goes through his lawn and digs out the dandelions this time of year. And when I dig them out, you can see there's almost no, you know, I dug out the roots pretty carefully, but there's almost no topsoil, because the landscape architect I worked for in Wilmington, Delaware in the 90s, we would do like 2 or 3 days in the office and 2 or 3 days out in the field. And when we were in the field, he did not like to waste topsoil. And now I understand why. I mean, you know, and I've just developed that habit where whenever I dig out a weed or something, or if I'm stripping the ground for plant matter, I take my fingers and kind of rub the soil together and put the topsoil back on the lawn or the yard or the site, because I don't want to throw it away in the trash. So these are things we don't want. This is so here's the area. This is riprap, right? It's probably the area between here and here would be the riprap. And again, you know, grass is good if we have to, like in a desert situation like this. But even with grass, we still have erosion, and sometimes lots of erosion when we have grass or other less robust root systems. And so we don't want those. So ideally, we'd like trees. And so that's what we want. We want trees. So if you are looking at a riparian zone, we generally want trees. In this case, it looks like mangroves, because, well, mangroves are also good for hurricanes, for keeping the storm surge down in a hurricane. Those of you guys who are from the Gulf Coast know all about that. The rest of you are like, what are you talking about? But mangroves are kind of interlocking. Well, look it up. You can look it up on Google, but they're like interlocking. They have really interlocking roots, and they grow in marshy situations. And in places like Louisiana and Florida, we've eliminated a lot of them, but we need them as the significant protection from storms. Actually, in the Northeast, you know, what's really good for water quality, because it filters it, is oysters. So we're starting to replant oyster beds all around. Well, man, if you want to look up oysters in New York City, if you're from New York, if you're living in New York, if you've ever lived in New York, or if you're just curious, Google oysters in New York City. I mean, the amount of oysters that were consumed by people in New York City in, you know, the 1800s is insane. But there were oysters everywhere. Something like 1 out of every 5 oysters that were eaten in the world were eaten in New York City or something during that time, because the entire New York City area, all those rivers and the East River and the Harlem River and Hudson River and so forth were just full of oysters. Anyhow, so this is what we want to see. We want to see a riparian zone that has lots of really mature big trees, and we definitely don't want to tear those down, even though there's a temptation to, because we want access to the waterfront, right? I mean, if there's a stream, we want to be able to see it. and maybe we want to be able to play in it, but we need that for when the flood comes, because it's what's going to hold the soil together. And of course, sometimes we have to use man-made things to kind of prevent the erosion.